experience less guilt when we do have to say no. Wonderful, wonderful topic here. And if you're new to Group in our spaces, we converse amongst one another through the chat pod. So you can familiarize yourself with the chat pod before we get started. You can reference my introduction message. And as stated in the intro message, please let us know what part of the world you're joining us from today. Always fun to see what parts of the world participants are logging in from. And also, if comfortable, please not only share your reasons for attending this groupinar, but also some things you hope to gain through attendance of this groupinar. A few announcements before we get started with our topic today. You will receive a recording of this groupinar in its entirety, concluding the groupinar that you'll have access to for a period of 7 days. And yes, this works for all of the groupinars that we offer on BetterHelp, whether it be another topic that I present on or a topic that my colleagues present on. Sign up for it. Even if you're unable to attend live, you will still receive that recording of the groupinar concluding for that day that you will have access to for a period of 7 days. Given that's the case, please be mindful as to what you share in the chat pod. Please, no personal specific information as we value your privacy, and thank you for your consideration there. Also, you can reference, I have shared the slides we will be looking through today for you to download. So reference the shared files portion in the chat pod for you to download the slides that we're going to be referencing today. So welcome if you're just getting logged in. Participants from all over the world joining us today, from Palestine, Spain, Austria, Singapore. Welcome to you. Someone shares at the moment they feel guilty for doing literally anything if they think it might let someone down. Yes, wonderful thing we're going to be delving into. Finding ways to recognize our intentions surrounding why we do things. And if the intention is to do something so that we don't hurt somebody else's feelings, it may be best to challenge that effectively, to find ways to work through that in a way that's most beneficial in use of assertiveness. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Seattle, Washington, welcome to you. Florida, welcome. Welcome to you all. And for our members getting logged into the space, again, welcome to you. Please familiarize yourself with the chat pod. That's how we will all converse amongst one another today. And you have the ability to label your text as a question. So please, throughout, ask questions. We're going to have about 1 or 2 breaks to pause for those particular questions. We'll do my best to reference as many as I'm able to reference given the time that we have and the number of questions that we have. So if I do not get to your question, my apologies in advance, and thank you for your understanding. So welcome if you're just getting logged in. Again, really excited to share this topic with you all on assertiveness, namely saying no, using assertiveness without feeling guilty about it, or experiencing less guilt when we learn ways in which to use assertiveness effectively. In the first half of our discussion, we're going to be looking into different types of communication, ending on what assertiveness specifically is. And our latter half, we're going to be looking at application strategies, ways in which to use assertiveness in efforts to experience less guilt when we say no. Really wonderful. And if you've yet to check out my boundaries groupinar, I would highly encourage you do so, as assertive communication is essential for use of effective boundary setting. So check out the groupinars tab. I think I'm going to be offering that on Monday, tomorrow. So check it out. Sign up for it if you haven't already. Again, it's a wonderful supplement to this groupinar presentation. One final thing we'll reference before we get started. Someone shares, and this is a great point, they want to learn to say no to family in a healthy way and not feel bad when they need to draw some of those boundaries. Excellent, excellent. I'm going to be looking at some really useful strategies for you, as well as others who may have that focal point for today, and efforts in using assertiveness and experiencing less guilt by doing so. So wonderful. So if you're just getting logged in, welcome to you. We're going to be getting started now. My name is Corey Pitts. I'll be giving a bit more of an introduction here in a moment, but please familiarize yourself with the chat pod, ask questions throughout. We're going to have a break here in about 20 or 30 minutes to reference our chat pod here for the first set of questions. So please ask questions throughout. So as mentioned, my name is Corey Pitts. I'm a duly licensed mental health and substance abuse clinician in the state of North Carolina. Obviously, I'm a provider on the BetterHelp platform, but also I'm a provider on the Teladoc platform. Full-time, I work for UNC Hospitals in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. In all of these settings, I'm working with persons in both individual as well as group counseling settings and assisting them in goals that they set for themselves that relates to mental health improvements, substance use improvements, things of that nature. My treatment approaches tend to be eclectic, meaning I have knowledge in several theories and interventions and tend to utilize those that best suits the needs of the clients in which I'm working with. Today, a really informative one we'll be looking at is assertiveness, utilization, and intervention. Again, the first half of our discussion, understanding the different types of communication. A big focal point is the miscommunication between aggressive and assertive communication. A lot of people think aggressive and assertive communication are the same thing. They are not. As we'll be discussing, aggressive and assertiveness, two completely different things. So really looking forward to the opportunity today. Now, in efforts to further understand communication, it's important that we take some time to delve into the three types of communication listed here: passive communication, aggressive communication, and that healthy middle ground that we'll be talking more about is what we reference to as assertive communication. And for you visual learners, this is a great clip to familiarize yourself with because the body characteristics associated with these types of communication are depicted here. We're going to start first with passive communication here in a bit, but really pay attention to the body language here as well as in the other body languages in the cartoons. Wonderful point there for our visual learners to get us started. Now, passive communication. Passive communication. We're going to reference this image to the top right to get us started before we delve into some more specifics of passive communication. But it may be blatantly obvious to many of you as to who the passive communicator is in this image. And if not, it is the person to the left in this image. Now, what are some body characteristics that depict this person is communicating passively? Well, let's look at the face first. This person is looking down, looking away. Even though the person to the right may be attempting to converse with them directly, the person to the left is not receiving that due to that loss of eye contact, minimal eye contact, etc. Also, this person slightly slouched over, looking down away. This does not exude confidence. There's a higher likelihood, as we'll be discussing, if someone presents themselves in this way, of being taken advantage of. And yes, even by those who are well-meaning people. So during passive communication, a person prioritizes the needs, wants, and feelings of another, even at their own expense. So a person does not express their own needs, and most importantly, they don't stand up for their own needs. Again, for varying reasons. Commonly, the reason why people do not stand up for their own needs is due to being perceived as being selfish if they do so. I'm here to tell you today, and we're going to say this numerous times, you are not selfish for standing up for yourself so long as you are standing up for yourself in a respectful way. As mentioned, those who are passive in their communication have a higher likelihood of being taken advantage of, even by those who have well intentions, that are well-meaning people. Why is that? Oh, well, Corey didn't say anything about me not borrowing his car. Therefore, I assumed that Corey was okay with me borrowing his car because Corey didn't say anything about it. This is the perception from persons when we communicate passively with them as to their expectations or whatever the case may be there. Other traits of passive communication. Passive communicators tend to be soft-spoken or quiet. They may talk low, quietly, looking away like what I'm doing here. They allow others to take advantage of situations, prioritizing the needs of other people. They demonstrate that poor eye contact. As we discussed, they may look down, they may look away. They don't express their own needs and wants. Again, for varying reasons, but commonly it's due to the perception of if I do this, then I'm going to be perceived as selfish if I express myself here. And a huge focal point that's important in assertive communication is confidence. And in passive communication, individuals lack this confidence. And even if you recognize this today and saying, hey, Corey, I really don't have much confidence. I struggle with that. I have difficulty with it. That's okay. Embrace it. Fake it till you make it, as we'll be discussing. There are effective ways to exude confidence, even if one does not feel confident in their approach, their demeanor, etc. So that is passive communication, when a person prioritizes the needs, wants, and feelings of another, even at their own expense. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we reference aggressive communication. Again, not to be confused with assertive communication. Aggressive communication is completely different. Now, aggressive communication, a question I reference here commonly, people will say, well, Corey, what about passive aggressive communication? Very good question. Passive aggressive communication is sarcasm and it's ambiguous. So the demeanor follows the traits that we're going to be looking at, but it's ambiguous as to what the communicator is attempting to convey. An example may be, oh, it's okay, I didn't need to borrow the car the weekend, when in fact they did need to borrow the car on the weekend. Again, that sarcasm, that ambiguity there. Now, with aggressive communication, let's once again reference the image to the bottom left. And for some of you, it may be blatantly obvious as to who the aggressive communicator is. But if it's not obvious to you, it is the person to the right in this image. Now, what are some things that depict this person is communicating aggressively? Starting first with the body language, tone, boundary violation is a big piece here. Look at this person. They are yelling at them. It appears as if they're placing their finger on the person's chest. And it's off-putting to the person to the left. They're taking a step back, away, attempting to get away from the particular person. It looks stern. It looks abrasive. And these are the dangers of aggressive communication. And through aggressive communication, a person expresses that their needs, wants, and feelings are the only things that matter. And oftentimes, in cases of aggressive communication, another person is bullied, and often the needs of the other person are ignored. So, through aggressive communication, some other traits here worth mentioning. Aggressive communicators tend to get easily frustrated. They may have that hair trigger mentality. You ask them a question, they jump down your throat. What? How dare you say this to me? What are you talking about, you moron, you idiot? They use belittling, criticism, humiliation, domination, largely as a means to convey this point that their needs, wants, and feelings are the only things that matter. They may speak in a loud or overbearing way. They have an unwillingness to compromise, which is a huge piece in assertive communication, a willingness to compromise in conjunction with confidence, as we'll be discussing. Frequent interruption, disrespect towards others. Again, you can see the points here. Those who communicate aggressively commonly use these themes as a means to get what it is they want ultimately in conversation. And it's not fair. And sadly, I hear many reports of aggressive communication occurring within workplace settings. And if that is the case with you today in referencing the chat pod, when you ask a question, please share that if you're comfortable sharing. Effective ways to work through combating an aggressive communicator and managing one's own emotion in response to that. So that's aggressive communication, prioritizing the needs of one person and saying the other person's needs do not matter. So the healthy middle ground is what we reference to as assertive communication. Assertive communication. And just as we've been doing, let's reference the images once again, starting first with the image to the left. Both persons in this image are doing a wonderful job in use of assertive communication. And what are some things that indicate this? Both persons are using good body language. They're exuding confidence, minimal encouragers, we call it. They're nodding, shaking their heads. Okay, yeah, I see what's going on here. And many of you may argue in saying, well, Corey, the person to the left in that image is not looking directly at the person to the right. That's okay. It's natural in conversation to minimally break eye contact as a means to gather thoughts. Think about it. If I was talking with you all today, looking at you directly like this, it would be off-putting for you. It would make you uncomfortable. So if you're talking and you break away for a moment and then come back to the conversation, that's totally healthy. That's appropriate. That's effective. Secondly, let's look to the image to the right. It can be surmised here it may be an instance of parent punishing child for wrongdoing. Great distance between the two. Attempting to exude that confidence, using those hand gestures. I'm not okay with you doing this. This was not all right that you broke this particular rule, whatever the case may be. Again, maintaining that healthy eye contact. Now, assertive communication emphasizes the importance of both persons' needs. And during assertive communication, a person stands up for their own needs, wants, and feelings, but they also listen to and respect the needs of another person. Notice that does not say accepts, it says listens to and respects. We can not accept somebody's viewpoint, but we do need to recognize, as it relates to assertiveness, that one person's viewpoint is important to them and acknowledge that. Very powerful that we do this. Assertive communication is defined by the two C's. It's defined by confidence as well as a willingness to compromise. Confidence and a willingness to compromise. So, other traits of assertive communicators. Assertive communicators listen without interruption. It's a healthy call and response that occurs in regards to communication. Hey, I hear what you're saying here. Here's what's okay with me. Here's what's not okay with me. How would you like to proceed with this moving forward? Assertive communicators clearly state their needs and wants, just as I had done there. They have that willingness to compromise. Hey, I can't do this, but I am able to do that. Does that work for you? Again, assertive communicators stand up for their own rights. And no, you are not selfish for standing up for your own rights, so long as you do so in a respectful way, maintaining confident tone, confident body language, demonstrating that good eye contact, all of these traits in which we have discussed thus far today. Now, let's look at a particular scenario in efforts to play out some of the body language and characteristics associated with assertive communication, among other types of communication strategies here. So, the scenario looking at is a friend has asked to borrow your car, and this is going to be a big inconvenience for you. So, a passive response, remember, this is where we would prioritize the needs, wants, and feelings of another person, even at our own expense. So a passive response may look something like this. Yeah, I guess that's all right. Do you need me to fill the tank? So did you see the demeanor change there? Immediate ambiguous statement. Yeah, maybe, scratching my face. I don't know. I guess that's fine. Furthermore, it's already an inconvenience for me, but I'm further inconveniencing myself to prioritize the person's need by offering to fill the tank up with gas. What always occurs in passive communication is harboring a feeling of resentment, feeling as if you're taken advantage of in some way. For these reasons, the anxiety about not standing up for oneself serves as a deterrent and causes one to do things that is beneficial to the other person and the other person only. Now, an aggressive response to this particular scenario may look something like this. No way. Why would I let you borrow my car, you freaking idiot? Don't even ask me that again. You're such a moron. Get off my property. Now, again, we see the dangers here. Very off-putting. I started with a belittling statement. No way. Further belittling. Why would I let you borrow my car? You moron, you idiot, whatever the case may be. You're crazy to even ask me about that. Further belittling. And the response from that is going to be, boy, I asked Corey for something and I was off put by his response. And more importantly, I'm not comfortable asking him for something anymore based on the response that I received from him. So a healthy middle ground is that assertive response. Remember, it's defined by confidence as well as that willingness to compromise. So an assertive response may look something like this. Hey, I need my car that day. However, I have time later in the day to which I can drop you off. Does that work for you? See how this works? I used an assertive statement. I said, I'm not able to give you the car. I need it that day. I offered a compromise. However, I do have time later on today that I could drop you off. Does that work for you? See how that works? Rolls off the tongue. No ambiguity. It's confident. We attempted to compromise when necessary. All great ways to do what we call softening the no as it relates to an assertive response. So to reiterate, assertiveness is a communication style in which a person stands up for their own needs, wants, and feelings, while also taking into consideration the needs, wants, and feelings of another person without behaving passively or without behaving aggressively. Simply put, that healthy middle ground, your needs, others' needs, assertiveness is right there in the middle. For you visual learners, this is a great tool for you all today. So, a few tips on assertiveness here. We're going to take some time to focus on before our first break for questions. Respect yourself. Say this to yourself today. Your needs, wants, and feelings are just as important as anybody else's. I don't care what you've been told. I don't care what it is you might assume about the situation. It is totally fine to express what it is you want in a situation so long as you are respectful towards the rights of other people. Next, express your thoughts and feelings calmly. Feelings are wonderful advisors, but they're horrible masters. Therefore, giving the silent treatment, yelling, threatening, shaming are all great examples as to what not to do in particular situations. Take responsibility for your emotions and express them calmly and in a factual manner. Try starting sentences with I feel. I feel blank when this happens. I feel upset when you talk to me in this way. I feel angry when these things happen. I feel belittled when you talk to me in this way. Express the thoughts and feelings calmly. Very, very important point here. Next, plan what it is you'd like to say. Know your wants and needs, and most importantly, how you can express these wants and needs before entering a particular conversation. Come up with specific sentences and word phrases that you can use. Practice makes perfect. Practice with your individual counselor. Use worksheets, use material. We're going to be looking at some strategies here in the latter half, ways in which to say no in use of assertiveness and experiencing less guilt. But take these concepts, apply them in your life, use your own vernacular as to how you proceed in these types of communications. And what we'll be delving into in our latter half of our discussion today, say no when you need to. Remember this, you cannot make everybody happy all the time. When you need to say no, do so clearly. Do not lie about the reason. We're going to be looking at that here in a bit. Don't be ambiguous about the delivery. No is not a bad word. It is okay to say, hey, I'm unable to do this today. Hey, this doesn't work with my particular schedule. But offer to help find another solution when it's appropriate to do so. This is going to soften the no. This is going to strengthen the relationship long term, and it's going to make both parties feel better about themselves in the long run. So, wonderful tips there on assertiveness. So, as promised, we'll reference the chat pod again. So, thank you for your patience up to this point. Please ask questions throughout too. If you haven't already here, I'm going to look and see if we have any that have highlighted their text as a question. So please ask questions up to this point. Someone shares that they find themselves constantly wanting to people please, putting their health and well-being on the back burner. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Many of us do experience this to a degree. Well, if I say no to them, then they're going to miss out on something. And well, I know I'm not feeling the best, but why don't I do this because they're going to get what it is they want? But ultimately, we're left to suffer with the consequence of that. As opposed to saying, take responsibility for our emotion. Okay, maybe I'm not feeling up to speed to do that today. Maybe it's not best for me to pursue this particular task. Allow that feeling to advise you. Wonderful, wonderful point there. Wonderful. Just reading here. And many of you are recognizing this, and we're going to touch on this too. You may recognize, okay, I do really well. I'm assertive with some people in my life. Maybe I'm more passive, more aggressive with other persons in my life. That's okay. Recognize wherever it is you may be and try to find that healthy middle ground. Excellent. Yes, again, if you're unable to attend the Groupinar live, sign up for it. You will receive a recording of the Groupinar in its entirety. You'll have access to for a period of 7 days. So please, if you the Boundaries Groupinar that you mentioned, sign up for that. If you're unable to attend live, you can reference back to it for that period of 7 days. How to be more assertive when that's your personality and maybe you're more introverted. Practice. Find opportunities to which you can use assertiveness techniques, starting with those smaller areas, gradually working your way up to those bigger areas there. Practice, practice makes perfect. How to communicate assertively as a professional environment, such as social work, where there's a higher risk of aggression. Come from a place of respect. Ask yourself why it is that I'm communicating assertively with a particular person. What benefits will I receive in communicating assertively? And when we do so respectfully, even those who may communicate aggressively, there's a less likelihood of a person continuing to be aggressive when we come from a place of respect and we attempt to de escalate. Good questions. Is it appropriate to think about speaking assertively with a toddler as well, along the lines with this slide? Yes, absolutely. Can be appropriate. When we come from a place of respect, hey, not able to do this. Hey, what are your reasons for breaking this rule? I'm not okay with you breaking this particular rule. Wonderful question here. And sorry, everyone, I am having some connection difficulty here, so I'm going to briefly mute my camera and hopefully it will resume to where I can turn it back on. So I apologize for the inconvenience there, but we will carry on. At least you can hear me by audio until the camera comes back. Just reading here. And I'm getting some comments, Group and R breaking up a lot. I'm sorry about that. That might be connection in my area. Some of you say it's all right. I'm having some difficulty here, so my apologies. So reading here, what if you just don't want somebody to use your car? That's okay. That's totally appropriate. You don't have to compromise for a person to use the car. You can say, hey, you know what? I'm not okay with you using the car today. I'm not going to be able to let you do that. Totally appropriate to use that type of communication. This is a great question here. What can I say if I don't want to share the reason that I said no? When we're pressured as to behind reasons of saying no, no is a complete sentence. Saying something along the lines of, hey, I'm not comfortable sharing that with you. Or, hey, I'm just not able to do this today. It doesn't impede, it impedes my values. It impedes concepts of my well-being, whatever the case may be. But yeah, don't feel obligated. If somebody wants you to share the reason that you said no, say, I'm not comfortable sharing that. Moreover, I don't have to give you a reason for me saying no. Great questions, everyone. Just reading here. Someone shares, I'm actually pretty good at using assertive communication in a lot of parts of my life, just not with my spouse. How do I deal with assertive communication when there's aggressive communication from my spouse? Acknowledge the aggressiveness is occurring. Saying something along the lines of, hey, I'd really like to talk with you about this. However, I don't feel as if I'm able to do so by the way in which you're communicating with me. I'd like to have a conversation where we can each have level heads and talk without raising our voices. Is this something we can agree on? And if it doesn't occur, knowing when to walk away. We always have a right to say, hey, it seems like this is escalating. Things aren't really improving within these realms. Therefore, I'm going to walk away for about 5 minutes, and I'd like to resume this with level heads and ensuring we each can talk collaboratively about this. Great questions. Just reading here. I have a little bit more time for one or two more questions, so please ask questions throughout. And sorry, I've had some pauses here too, because I'm also trying to look at what may be causing the connection difficulties. So thank you all for your understanding. How to go from passive to assertive in a job of 5 years without being judged that you're now aggressive. 5 years without being judged that you are now aggressive, excuse me. This is something that occurs commonly. Okay, great. The video is back. Awesome. This occurs quite commonly. When we start using assertiveness, people will communicate us of being aggressive because when we stand up for ourselves, one might say, oh, well, by you standing up for yourself, you're being aggressive. And you can say, no, I hate that you're taking this as me being aggressive. However, by me standing up for myself, I'm trying to be respectful. Therefore, in fact, I'm not being aggressive in my communication. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sorry, guys, about the connection here. I don't know what's going on, but it's probably going to be in and out like that. So my apologies about that. How to rephrase the no when the person doesn't respect the boundaries and manipulates you into saying yes. Great question here. The person doesn't know the boundaries and they manipulate you into saying yes. In rephrasing, saying things along the lines of, not at this time, unable to talk about this further. Hey, I'm sorry about this. However, this isn't going to change. Or, hey, I appreciate you coming to me about this. However, this isn't able to work for me at this time. Practice makes perfect. Finding those ways again to say, here's what I am okay with, here's what I'm not okay with. What are some ways we can come to a resolve based on this? And then reiterate that again. If they say, oh, come on, you always do this, or just this one more time, I understand this is something you're needing from me. However, I'm not able to provide this for you at this time. Do hope that you understand. Great questions here. All right. So we have time for one, maybe two more questions. So again, please ask questions. Ask questions here, just reading. Oh, there's a question earlier I didn't reference. Dealing with guilt trippers that make you feel bad for saying no. How do you deal with that? Acknowledge how you feel in response to that person's communication towards you. You really or not you, I'm sorry. I am upset by the ways in which you're communicating with me, as I feel guilty when you speak to me in this way. I feel inept. I feel inferior whenever this occurs in the conversation. When we take responsibility for our emotion and we convey accordingly based on that, and we don't use the accusatory you statement, then things can get a lot better in the conversation. Because when we use that you statement, guess what happens? It's perceived as if somebody is pointing the finger at us. That, oh, you made me upset about this. You made me angry, as opposed to, I'm upset by the way you spoke to me in this situation. Remember that phrasing, I feel X when this occurs. Excellent, excellent. So we'll carry on now with the application, ways in which to use assertiveness and experiencing less guilt with saying no. And thank you for your ongoing collaboration. I see at a glance here that you all are supporting one another, uplifting one another. So I love to see that. Thank you all for that in this particular space today. Always a beautiful thing to see. Wonderful questions we were able to reference. Really glad there. So now that we have an understanding into realms of assertiveness, how can we use assertive communication as a means to experience less guilt when we say no? This first step is so important because unless somebody follows this, everything else I'm about to say after this will not be of benefit. Learning in which to experience less guilt and saying no begins with permission. Permission to do what is in your best interest. And guess what? Unless you do this, no strategy in the world is going to make a difference. So how do we do this? Revisit your personal boundaries. Honor the commitments you've made to yourself. Once you begin to respect yourself fully, something really neat that happens is others around you will find it easier to respect you. A lot of people say here, well, Corey, what do you mean? You mean when I start saying no and using assertiveness that people will respect me more? Well, think about it. Assertiveness and boundaries are based in our values, those things that are most important to us. So when we guard our values and we don't compromise those values for anything, people will say, oh, wow, I respect Bob. Bob never works overtime or works on the weekends so that he can spend time with his family. Bob values his family and he protects what's important to him. Therefore, I want to be more like Bob. So you can see the benefit there. So allow yourself permission to do what is in your best interest. Very, very good point to consider to get us started. Now, once we've done that, we've allowed ourselves this permission, it's important to get our priorities straight. Ask yourself this very question. What's most important to you? Write it down. Keep a copy with you at all times. Once you know what it is that you want for yourself, something really cool happens. You stop agreeing to those things that get into the way. Think about this. Again, when you know your values are your roadmap. You can say, oh, okay, well, if I say yes to this particular instance, then something I value, such as family, time with loved ones, whatever the case may be, will be compromised by me saying yes. Oh, okay, so this can be a place for which I can really benefit from saying no. See how that works? When we know our priorities and we practice it, we keep copies with us at all times. We know when it's effective to say no. And if you're unaware as to where to start, ask your counselor for aspects of values clarification, materials, values exploration, materials. These things will really assist you in finding ways in which to prioritize the values in your life. So get your priorities straight. Very, very important to consider. Once you've gotten your priorities straight, take responsibility for yourself. When you realize that you are responsible for yourself and the tasks that you take on, you'll get that saying yes to things that you really want to say no to is just a way of deferring making your own decisions. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear this and they say, well, Corey, well, if this person in my life changed, then I would feel better. Or, oh, if only they didn't ask me to do these things all the time, then I wouldn't have this much stress. No, we're responsible for us and only us. And I get it. It's anxiety provoking when we have to say no to people. It's anxiety provoking when we have to say, hey, you know what? I'm not able to do this anymore because we fear how another person may respond to us by us communicating in that particular way. But when we say, hey, if I take responsibility for me and I stop pointing the finger, I stop saying, hey, I'm this way because of this person, and we say, hey, maybe I'm this way because I'm taking things on due to my anxiety about what might happen if I say no to this person. So remember, it's very important here. You are responsible for you and only you. This is how we start experiencing less guilt as it relates to saying no in circumstances in our lives. This is a very important one that many tend to forget about. We always have a right to assert and ask for clarification or more information regarding particular statements. What's really beneficial about this is it will not only buy you time and allow you to weigh your options as well as your priorities, it also makes it clear to the other person that you're not saying yes to their requests straight away. So it's totally appropriate here to say something along the lines of, hey, could you tell me exactly what you're asking me to do here? Or, hey, I really appreciate you asking me to do this. However, I'd like to take some time and think about this before I get back to you. Can I have a decision for you by, say, Friday? This is a wonderful thing to consider because it's telling another person without telling them, I'm not going to agree to your request straight away. I'm going to need some time to think about this to see if it matches up and it benefits me in a way in which it doesn't coincide or compromise, my particular value. So when in doubt, know that you have a right to ask for clarification or more information regarding particular circumstance. Very important. This is a powerful one. It's for all my nice persons in the room. Everybody who's been told at some point, oh, I love talking to Joe because Joe always does what it is I'd like for him to do. Or I always love talking to Karen because Karen, every time I ask her to do something at work, she's an all-star. Karen always does what is asked of her and what's needed from me. If you say yes so that you can be perceived as the nice person, then the chances are that you're going to feel resentment are much higher. And the chances are you're going to follow through half-heartedly with your request is higher. And this doesn't feel well for the person that asked something of you, and it really doesn't feel well for us. So being nice doesn't always mean doing something that somebody else wants you to do. Sometimes it simply means just saying no politely. Not at this time. Hey, I'm not able to do this at this time, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. Hey, I know this is something that you trust me with, and I appreciate that. However, it's not going to be feasible for me to put this in my agenda at this time. You see how that works? Rolls off the tongue. Take responsibility for your emotion. Use those I statements. Say no assertively. Do not be ambiguous about it. And most importantly, when it's appropriate, offer that compromise. Again, being nice doesn't always mean doing what others want you to do when they ask you to do it. Sometimes it means, again, just saying, no, not at this time. Hey, I appreciate it, but not able to fulfill the request. So please stop being overly invested in being nice. This is a very important one. You don't have to say yes, and more importantly, you don't have to give an explanation when you say no. How many of you have heard this situation play out in your life or the life of another? You say no, and here's how it goes. Oh, well, Bob, I know you need to borrow my car, but if things were different, I'd let you borrow the car, but I just really need to do stuff with my kids. And you know what, Bob, I'm totally sorry here. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to do this. And I hope you understand things would be different if my kids weren't in town and stop doing that. It's not beneficial. You have the right to say no without giving a reason for your answer. It's okay to say something like, hey, no, thank you. I have plans. Even if your plan involves doing nothing, please do not give a long explanation and please do not apologize for yourself. It is okay. I call this the I'm sorry but phenomenon. Challenge that. No, not at this time. Hey, I'm unable to do this. Hey, I understand you need the vehicle today. However, that's something I'm not going to be able to do for you, or that I'm not comfortable doing for you at this particular time. Please do not apologize for yourself when you have to say no. Another useful piece here, the sandwich technique, I call it. When in doubt, remember the sandwich. And it's 3 simple steps that can assist you in delivery of an assertive statement and experiencing less guilt when we deliver it. Why is that? When we have a framework, we know how to approach use of assertive communication in those situations where we get that urge of, well, I'm really not comfortable saying yes to this, so I need to say no. So the 3 steps, just like the layers of a sandwich, we offer a positive comment to a person, we follow that with a decline, and then we suggest an alternative, also known as attempting to compromise. So let's put this into a particular example. Let's say somebody at work asks you to take on a project that you don't have time for, and frankly, you don't have interest in taking on the project. Following the steps through the sandwich technique again, the layers of the sandwich, that top piece of bread, the meat, the condiments, and then that bottom piece of bread may look something like this. Hey, that sounds like a great project. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Unfortunately, at the moment, I have a lot of other things taking up my time, and I'll be unable to fulfill the request that you're asking. Hey, I was talking to Bill the other day in HR, and Bill really would appreciate the opportunity to lead a project like this. Maybe you could benefit from asking Bill. See how that works? We offered a positive comment, a validating statement. We gave our no, our decline, and more importantly, we suggested an alternative solution. We attempted to compromise. It's totally fine to attempt to compromise. And it's totally okay if a compromise isn't warranted, isn't necessary, or if you're not comfortable offering a compromise. All of these strategies are appropriate. They are okay. We do not have to offer a compromise. Do not feel forced to do so. That's why it's listed as optional there. So offer a positive comment, offer a decline, and then suggesting that alternative situation, compromise, example, whatever the case may be there. This is a very important one for all of you that say, well, Corey, I could never say no to my mom. I could never say no to my dad, my spouse, whoever the person may be. Very important to recognize here that when we say no to a person, we are not saying no to the particular person. We are saying no to the particular request, circumstance, or behavior. Now, very important here. If we confuse these two, guess what's going to happen? We're likely going to say yes when we really mean to say no. Almost always is the case. And yes, sometimes you may have to explain this to persons that you're saying no to. Hey, I understand this upsets you, but I'm not saying no to you. I'm saying no to you coming over on the weekends. I know this might be frustrating. I'm not saying no to you. I'm saying no to you borrowing my car, continuing to drive my car when I'm not comfortable with you doing that. Please do not confuse those two. It's very important to recognize that we are not rejecting a person when we say no. We are simply refusing the request. Love that there. And it's totally okay too to suggest an alternative solution. This is similar to what we looked at a moment ago in buying you time, but you can say something along the lines of, hey, I can't have this for you by tomorrow, but I'll be happy to do it by next Monday. That way, the person asking something of you can take responsibility for the problem as well as the solution. In other words, let them figure out if it must be done on their timetable. And if so, guess what else? It is totally okay for them to find somebody else to do so. It's very powerful when we use this suggestion of an alternative solution because it's communicating to a person, I'm not taking this on immediately. I'm not taking this on straight away. And it teaches people that when they ask something of us that they need to understand that we have priorities too. There might not be the flexibility, the feasibility to adopt those things in one's life whenever there's other obligations occurring. So it's totally appropriate to suggest those alternative solutions. Excellent. And our final point, and we'll wrap up on this before we reference the chat pod for some more questions. Practice. Practice makes perfect. Saying no in the mirror. Role play situations with a partner, friends, certain family members. As I had mentioned earlier, starting with those smaller areas in life and gradually working your way up to those bigger areas. Small area may be something like having a conversation with a neighbor about something, working your way up to the bigger area there of having a conversation with a supervisor about your work hours or the ways in which your supervisor talks to you in particular meetings. This takes a lifetime of practice to master, but it's really important to note that every small confrontation is worth considering, is worth progressing towards, and ultimately going to feel better about yourself in the long run in pursuing these tasks as opposed to avoiding these particular tasks. It takes a lifetime, everyone. So practice makes perfect. Practice with your counselor. Practice with those supportive persons in your life. It makes the world of difference. So that is it for our content. And thank you so much for your time in being a part of this group in our next 5 minutes or so, we will reference the chat pod once again. Again, apologies for the connection difficulty today. Thank you for your understanding. And I do hope that despite the connection difficulty on my end, you were still able to gather some content and you're able to hear me fine. I see some people saying that they're able to, maybe some aren't. So my apologies there. So referencing here once again, books for assertive communication. Books for assertive communication. I can't think of any off the top of my head, unfortunately. One that I do recommend, it is based in Christianity, and even if you aren't adherents to that religion, it's fine. A lot of the concepts in it are very beneficial from assertive communication and boundaries. It's called Boundaries by Doctors Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. So just reading here. Suggestion for people who aren't confident enough to reinforce boundaries. Suggestions for people who aren't confident enough to reinforce boundaries. Practice. Challenge yourself. Ask yourself what might be leading to that lack of confidence. Chances are it might be due to anxiety of some sort that has evoked or that has developed in some way as to how another person may react to a particular situation. So challenge yourself there. Ask yourself that very question. What is contributing to this lack of confidence? What about me exudes the confidence and lack thereof the particular confidence there? Great question. Just reading here. How do you say no if it's something you don't want to do rather than can't do? Like, yes, I'm available, but that's inconvenient for me. You could say that. It doesn't have to be exactly like that. You can say things along the lines just as we had looked at. Hey, no, thank you. I have plans. Or, hey, that sounds great. However, I have some other things taking up my time. Or, hey, I really appreciate you asking me to do this, but unfortunately, that's going to be a little late for me. I really like what somebody said here. A plan to do nothing is still a valid plan. Exactly. Sometimes just saying that, hey, I have plans to do nothing. I have plans to adopt self care, to take time to relax, to focus on those realms. Excellent, excellent. Even though we know that we are rejecting the request and not the person might not see it that way. How do we remove guilt in this situation without having to explain ourselves to them? Very, very good question. Let's read it again. The person might not see it this way. How do we remove guilt in the situation without having to explain ourselves to them? Sometimes it's just acknowledging how we feel, how the other person might feel there. It's not our job to fix another person's response to when we use assertiveness and setting boundaries. We can acknowledge that they're upset in some way. Hey, I see this is upsetting to you. I acknowledge that this might not be the news you wanted to hear today. I hear you that me telling you this wasn't the best of news that you received today. These are ways we experience less guilt. We take the time to say, I'm responsible for myself and my emotion only. I'm not responsible for how the person may react in response to that. And even if they still perceive me as saying no to them, we can't control that. We can attempt to convey, hey, my efforts here aren't malicious or of malintent. I'm saying no for this reason. And after that, wiping our hands clean with it, being done with it. Excellent question. Excellent, excellent question. Just reading here. So we'll reference about one more question here. Again, you will receive a recording of this groupinar in its entirety to your email that you registered to this groupinar with. So check your email in here in a moment. I'm going to be concluding the groupinar, and you will have a recording of this groupinar in its entirety for your convenience to refer back to at a later time. So one final question here. How do you say, and we'll end on this one, how to say no to somebody you care about and want to help? How to say no to someone you care about and want to help. Ask yourself what you're comfortable helping them with. It's okay to say yes if you really want to say yes. I'm not saying, and there's a question in here too that I saw about saying no too often. If you really are okay with helping a person, it doesn't create anxiety, it doesn't impede against your values, then do so. It's okay. It's appropriate. But if you really get that gut feeling of, oh, I really don't want to do this, follow that. Listen to it. Allow that feeling to advise you in saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to say no because I don't feel comfortable with this. Because if I say yes, that's going to take away from something that I value in some way, which is very important to consider. So ask yourself what you're okay with offering as assistance and proceeding accordingly from that. All right, so unfortunately, we're out of time today. So my apologies again for the tech difficulty, but at least you were still able to hear some of the content discussed. As mentioned, if you enjoyed this groupinar today, check out my Boundaries groupinar, which is a great continuation of this material, applying assertiveness and use of boundaries. Go forth, be well, be assertive in however you apply these concepts. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend this groupinar. Do hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining us from today. Bye, everyone.